The story begins in a scientific laboratory. Some experiments were being conducted on mice. A scientist was working on a very big experiment. He injected a special kind of serum into a mouse and then placed it inside a closed box. After some time, when he checked the mouse, his eyes filled with shock and happiness. The experiment had been successful. He immediately ran to his senior, whose name was Dr. Andreas. He told him this amazing news. The project they had been working on for many years had finally achieved a big success. After this huge achievement, a big press conference was organized. Dr. Andreas stood in front of everyone and explained his work. He talked about the difficulties of the world. Wars everywhere, climate change, and pollution were troubling people. He removed a small box placed on the table, and underneath it stood a tiny man. This was Dr. Jorgen, the main scientist of this project. Seeing him, everyone became completely silent. Dr. Jorgen explained that 32 people from his team, including his wife, had voluntarily undergone this process. They had all become 5 inches tall. He assured everyone that this process was completely safe and painless. To prove his point, an assistant brought the rest of the team on a trolley. Everyone watched in amazement. Many tiny people were waving from the trolley. Dr. Jorgen said this was the beginning of a new era and the result of 5 years of hidden hard work. To show how much this experiment would benefit the whole world, an assistant lifted a small plastic bag. He said that this tiny bag contained all the waste produced by these 32 people over the last 5 years. Their idea was very clear. By becoming smaller, humans would use less space, less food, and less of everything. Dr. Jorgen gave an open invitation to the entire world that anyone who wanted could go through this process. This news spread across the world like wildfire. Everyone started talking about downsizing, becoming small. Now the story shifts its focus to our hero, Paul. At this time, Paul was living a very normal life. He was taking care of his sick mother at home. Unfortunately, despite his care, her health kept getting worse, and after some time, she passed away. Paul worked in a factory and also helped sick people. He genuinely loved helping others. Paul was married to a woman named Audrey. They didn't have children, but they loved each other very much. After marriage, they bought a new house, which used up all their savings. That's when Paul realized how difficult and expensive it was to fulfill dreams. One evening, Paul and Audrey went to a party with their friends. The main attraction of the party were 2 small people, Dave and Carol. They had come to explain the benefits of downsizing. Dave told the crowd that there were no disadvantages to becoming small. You could still do everything you liked, but in a world where your money would go much further. He said that their community was called Leisureland, where everything was very cheap. He talked about his huge mansion, which he could never have afforded in normal life. This presentation had a deep impact on Paul and Audrey. When they returned home, new dreams began to swirl in their minds. A few days later, they were invited to visit Leisureland. The next morning, they both went there. It was a completely clean, beautiful, and perfect place made only for small people. A cheerful, tiny man welcomed them and gave them a tour. He showed them his luxurious home, which he had bought for just a few dollars. He also introduced him to his tiny wife, and together they painted a picture of their happy life. A comfortable life without worrying about money now seemed very attractive. The guide continued explaining more to Paul and Audrey. He said that after becoming small, his life completely changed. Anyone could undergo this transformation and there would be no problems. After this, Paul and Audrey met a doctor. The doctor clearly explained the financial reality. He said that after becoming small, their big house would become useless. They could sell it, and become very rich in Leisureland. Everything there was so cheap that they could spend as much as they wanted, and their money would still never run out. Finally, both of them decided together to become small. Paul went to his job and told his co-workers that today was his last day. He said he was going to become small and start a new life in Leisureland. His co-workers were happy for him and said goodbye. Paul and Audrey met all their friends one last time because they knew they would never be able to meet them again after becoming small. They sold their house, they removed their wedding rings for the process, and prepared to leave their old life behind. The next morning, they boarded the special Leisureland bus along with many other hopeful people. The bus took them to a huge factory where humans were transformed. There, they were given one last chance to change their decision. An officer asked, "Do you have any doubts? Is anyone forcing you?" Paul and Audrey both confidently said they were doing this willingly. They were told that the process for men and women would happen in separate areas. They hugged one last time and promised to meet on the other side. Paul was taken to his area, where many naked men were standing preparing to be downsized. All the hair on their bodies was completely shaved. Any damaged or decaying teeth were removed. All this happened while they were unconscious, so they felt no pain. After becoming unconscious, Paul was placed into a large advanced machine. The process took about 20 minutes. When it was over, Paul had become exactly 5 inches tall. The newly downsized people were taken to a recovery area where everything was made according to their new size. Small-sized doctors were present there. Artificial teeth were also installed where their original teeth had been removed. After a long time, Paul regained consciousness. He was lying on a tiny bed. A nurse, who was also small, took care of him and said, "You are completely fine. The process was successful." She gave him tiny clothes and also brought him a huge biscuit, which from his new perspective looked like a sofa cushion. But Paul wasn't worried about himself. His eyes were searching only for his wife, Audrey. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Audrey. Her voice was filled with fear and regret. What she said completely broke Paul. She had become extremely scared during the final procedure. When she saw her hair being shaved, she couldn't handle it. She decided to back out of the process and left the facility. Meanwhile, Paul had completed the entire procedure. Now, he was only 5 inches tall. Paul was completely alone. He was permanently 5 inches tall. His heart was completely shattered. His dream of a perfect new life was destroyed before it even began. He became deeply depressed. Despite living in a large, luxurious mansion, he felt completely alone. Soon, his wedding rings were sent to him. Seeing them, huge compared to his size, deepened his pain. A full year passed. Paul remained alone. He lived a life of luxury, but he had no one to share it with. Sometimes he met his friend Dave, who would tell him, "There are plenty of women here. You'll find someone. Why are you thinking so much?" One evening, Paul was at his house with a date, but everything felt forced and empty. His upstairs neighbor, Dushan, who loved noise and parties, suddenly barged in. He invited Paul to his big party. Since Paul had nothing else to do, he agreed. The next night, Paul went to Dushan's grand party, carrying a big rose as a gift. Dushan was very happy. He said, "Drink freely. Lots of girls will be here. Forget your wife, bro, and hook up with someone else." But Paul couldn't connect with anyone. He drank all night, danced wildly, and eventually collapsed unconscious. By morning, the party was over. The next morning, the cleaning crew arrived. Dushan was so rich that he hired others to do everything. When Paul woke up with a hangover and a spinning head, His eyes fell on a cleaning woman. He recognized her. She was Sara, a famous Vietnamese activist whom Paul had seen on the news a year ago. The report showed that an entire small person settlement in Vietnam had been destroyed, and she was the only survivor. She had lost one leg in that incident and now used a prosthetic. Paul went to her. He was shocked that such a famous woman was doing this kind of work. He said he knew her story and that she used to be a journalist. He asked why she was doing cleaning work. Sara said plainly, "I need to survive. This job gives me just enough money to live." Paul noticed she was collecting some medicines from Dushan's flat. He stopped her and said it wouldn't be right to take them. She said they were for a sick friend. Dushan allowed cleaners to take anything they found useful. Paul used to help sick people in his past life. He noticed that Sara's prosthetic leg was poorly fitted and must be causing her pain. He said he could fix it. Sara was very happy to hear this. She told Paul he was a good man, and since he knew medical knowledge, she asked him to come see her sick friend. Seeing her helplessness and wanting to give meaning to his life, Paul agreed. He left his luxury life and boarded a bus with Sara, heading toward a part of Leisureland he never knew existed. Their bus crossed a huge wall. On the other side, Paul saw a poor settlement. There were no large houses, just slum-like homes made inside old shipping containers. Poor people like Sara lived there. She took him to her small home inside a container. Inside, a very sick woman was lying on the bed. Sara said this was her friend and asked Paul to treat her. Paul said he wasn't a real doctor, but Sara insisted he knew more than she did. Paul suggested using some of the medicines she had brought from Dushan's house. After thinking carefully, he gave her the medicines. Paul again said he would properly fix her prosthetic leg. Sara said they would do it in a few days. Paul left, but he couldn't forget Sara. A few days later, he went back to her house. Sara had bad news. The sick woman they had given medicine to had died. Sara said with fear that maybe she had given too much medicine. But she also said that before dying, the woman had a smile on her face, as if she had finally been freed from pain. Paul then started fixing her prosthetic leg. As he tightened the loose screws, Sara began telling her story. She said she had protested against the government's dam project in Vietnam. Because of that, she was imprisoned. Her sister was also imprisoned with her and couldn't survive the beatings. She died. During all this, Sara lost her leg in an accident. While Paul was working, the prosthetic suddenly broke. Sara got angry and said, "It was working at least, now you've ruined it." But Paul didn't give up. He lifted her onto his shoulders and said he would fix his mistake. He said he would do cleaning work until her leg was fixed. Now, Paul started cleaning rich people's houses in Leisureland. This work was much lower than anything he had done before, but he didn't mind. Helping others gave his life meaning again. He stayed with Sara for many days. During this time, he saw another side of her. Despite being poor, she helped elderly and sick people by giving them food and supplies. Her kindness touched Paul deeply. One day, when both were cleaning Dushan's flat, Dushan saw Paul and laughed. He joked, "First you were the mansion owner, now you're the cleaner. What's going on, man?" Paul simply said, "Long story, I'll tell you later." Dushan could tell that his friend looked happy. Dushan was talking to another man about a secret, high-paying mission to Norway. He invited Paul to come along. When Sara heard this, she immediately said she would go too. Paul warned her it could be dangerous, but Sara didn't change her decision. She said going to Norway had always been her dream. Finally, Paul, Sara, Dushan, and his partner boarded a special boat and set off on a long sea journey. During this journey, Paul met the real inventor of the downsizing project, Dr. Jorgen, and his wife, Annie. They were also going on this mission. Dr. Jorgen told Paul a terrifying truth. He said massive amounts of methane gas were being released from melting glaciers, and if this continued, the entire world would be destroyed. That's why he wanted to make humans smaller. If glaciers hadn't melted, his plan would have worked, but not everyone was willing to become small, and there was no way to stop this disaster at this speed. So think of this as the last party before the world ends, he said. Paul struggled to process this. He talked to Sara, and she also couldn't digest the fact that the world might truly end. That night, the heavy truth and their growing closeness brought them together. Paul kissed Sara, and they spent the night together. After a long journey, their group reached Norway. There, they found a beautiful small-person community living peacefully with nature. Unlike Leisureland, there were no walls or segregation here. The people were happy to see Dr. Jorgen and his wife. A woman from the community took Paul on a tour. She led him to a massive tunnel inside a mountain. She said this was their last hope of survival. 2 kilometers below the mountain, there was a huge underground bunker. Inside, everything was built so that food and water would never run out. A selected group of people would live underground for 8,000 years until the surface became livable again. They had stocked everything necessary. They would not let the human race go extinct. Hearing this filled Paul with new motivation. He felt that if he went inside, his life would finally have purpose. He happily told Sara that he had decided to enter the bunker. But Sara's heart broke. She became angry. She asked him how he could leave her after everything that happened between them. She asked if he was just passing time with her and didn't truly love her. Paul gave no direct answer. He insisted that he had to go, that this was his path. His words shattered Sara. She started crying. Paul told Dushan his decision. Dushan said he could still help people on the surface, but Paul had already made up his mind. When it was time to enter the bunker, everyone gathered to watch the sunset. They knew they would never see the sun again in their lives. Paul said goodbye to everyone. His eyes met Sara's. Without speaking, she begged him to stay. But Paul didn't look back and walked into the dark tunnel. The people began walking the nearly 2-kilometer-long path. It was dark, and they would have to walk all night. Paul was at the very end of the line. With every step, his heart grew weaker. He thought about Sara, Dushan, and all the relationships he had built. He realized that just staying alive wasn't life. If his loved ones weren't alive, what was the point of surviving? Outside, Sara and Dushan stood at the entrance, hoping Paul would return. Then they saw someone emerge from the darkness. It was Paul. He had changed his decision. Dushan laughed and said, "I knew you wouldn't go." Paul went straight to Sara. Looking into her eyes, he said the truth. "I love you too." Now they decided to leave the meaningless luxury life and live by helping people. If you liked the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel.